Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining the Garrison Institute's live interactive webinar. Today, I'm delighted to invite our guest, Roshi Enkyo Ohara. Roshi Pet Enkyo Ohara is a Soto Zen priest and abbot of Village Zendo in New York City. As a Zen teacher, she is well known for her ability to connect Zen practice to contemporary life. She's the author of the recent book on Zen practice, Most Intimate. She and her partner, Barbara Joshin Ohara, founded the Village Zendo over 30 years ago. Before we begin today's session, I'll go over a few logistical items about our gathering. We're on a Zoom webinar, so participant audio and video are off. You will only see Roshi Ohara and, for the time being, myself. For anyone unable to attend live, we are recording these sessions. You'll have a chance to view the recordings as well as a schedule of upcoming programs at garrisoninstitute.org. We offer these sessions free of charge as a goodwill gesture to support our community during such times of heightened uncertainty. We would welcome donations of any amount to help continue offer these sessions. Thank you. Finally, we'll have time for Q&A during this gathering. You can post your questions in the Q&A panel, which is accessible at the bottom of your screen by hovering your arrow over the Q&A button. We're on for an hour today, and we'll respond to as many questions as we can. Please forgive us if we're unable to get to your question. Thank you again, Roshi Ohara, for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. I've been asked to start my video. I love this technology that we're involved with. So welcome to everybody. Good to have you here on the Garrison site, which is the way so many of us practice nowadays on various technical sites. And just for us to take time today to settle our minds, to find some understanding during this daunting time, to engage and re-engage our appreciation of life just as it is, even right now. An appreciation which is always available to us if we can touch into it. Garrison has served as a solid friend and supporter for so many of us through the years, my group and so many different Buddhist and philosophical groups. And I appreciate this programming that they're doing and all the work that they do to open our hearts and add light to our minds. Because this is a time, the fact that we're doing this today, this is a time of such extraordinary change for all of us in our daily lives. The frightening uncertainty of the pandemic and the reality of racism coming up in everyone's face. Many of us who work in the criminal justice system and in the healthcare system have been aware of this for a long time, but my gosh, the massive changes in understanding that are happening right now. The recognition of racism in everyone's daily lives, whether they are denying it or not. Everything can feel confusing and a little frightening for us, all of the change. And we're challenged to find our center. I'm challenged to find my center every day when I read the news, when I hear what people are saying and thinking. I'm challenged to find my center, to understand my life and how it fits in with the life of all beings, and to figure out how I can help. Perhaps you too are concerned about how you can help, how you can serve, how any of us can remain strong and able to help others. So I'm going to try to offer some words of encouragement, kind of emanating from my own practice of Zen Buddhism. But I first want to start with a few minutes, kind of to allow us all to settle ourselves. Settle into our intentions for this hour. How come we decided, amid the confusing schedules we all have, how come we decided to meet together today to do this? A few moments of meditation, just stopping, of that quiet, allows us to come back to our true nature, to who we are in this moment, not yesterday or last year, now. No matter how obscured it may feel by the changes around us. So I'll give you a few instructions based on my own Zen tradition, but of course I invite you to sit in meditation in whatever way is comfortable for you. But I generally think it's beneficial, if it's possible, if your back can be gently aligned, kind of straight but not stiff, at ease, and that just allows us to breathe more easily, because the breath, the smoothness and ease of the breath is so much a part of finding ease in the mind. And in our tradition, we place our tongue up against the roof of our mouth, back of your front teeth, and that in a way connects the energy flow from the back and the front. So I use that technique whenever I am challenged. I stop and connect. And your eyes either half closed, as we do in the Zen tradition, with a relaxed gaze, or closed, if that's what you generally do. In our Zen tradition, we think it's a good idea to never forget that we are right here. So that's why there's a little bit of light that comes in. So now, settling yourself, can you take a breath in? And allow your whole body to take in that breath. All of your face and your jaw and your neck, all the way to your toes. Taking in a quiet breath of air. Allow your lower belly to just expand when it takes in air, and contract when it lets it back out. Just breathing in and breathing out. Just breathing in, breathing out. You are available and at ease. We can be still. And enjoy the breath. Enjoy the mind that enjoys the breath. Just stay with that flow. When a distracting thought arises, just come back to the quiet and ease of your breath. Staying with the breath. There's a subtle wisdom there. Just staying with the breath. What a gift it is that we give each other. We just sit together, whether or not we're in the same room or in the same meditation space. What a gift we give to one another. As we end the meditation period, I find it really helpful to just stop for a moment and thank myself. Try it. Just thank yourself for taking the time. And remember and appreciate that the time is always available to each one of us. We just remember to do it. So as we move from a kind of meditative space to considering our mind, we call meditation in Zen seated mind. And it's really a ritual practice, a way to stop kind of our everyday thought, our kind of running this way and that, and to sink into a different reality, one that recognizes our interconnectedness, that remembers our humanity, that we are an element in the vast stream of all that has ever been or will ever be. That all of the ones around us today are part of that stream that is constantly flowing. Like the Hudson that flows along Garrison's banks. And that quiet reminder, that remembrance of the vastness of which we're a part, can ground us and bring us to a clearer resolve about how to lead our lives. So, meditation practice, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 hours, helps us to become less hindered by our ego, by our fears, and more willing to see the more skillful and less harmful ways for us to proceed in expressing our care for others. And boy, do we need that now. These uncertain times, all of our daily lives have been so disrupted, and it can be hard for us to manage. The whole societal structure is being questioned, which is not a bad thing. Racism, disregard for the earth, and the plunging economy demand that we all face the new realities. And these changes are not hypotheticals, they're what's going on right now. And yet they can seem as if in a distance. Perhaps they're eclipsed by our inability to actually be present, to witness the changes that are going on in our everyday world. Because we're caught up in our own minds. We may just barely notice what's happening in our neighborhood. A loss of affordable housing. Maybe we're pleased to see the changes in conversations about race and gender. Or perhaps we notice sadly the tone that is present in the media world. The loss of civility. great changes in how we communicate. So these things can be distracting and distract us from the grand global changes that are going on all over this earth and its peoples. But the thing is, we may fail to see that the one who is seeing is also changing. The eyes that look out at the world and the ears that hear its sounds are also changing, being changed, and continuously changing. You know, we want to look back on the ancient teachings. From that perspective, you could say that a core of the Buddhist teaching was the teaching of anicca, impermanence, meaning without, and nika meaning permanence or constancy. Anicca reminds us that everything is constantly in flux. Nothing is fixed or unchanging. Our lives, our bodies, our world is in process always. And right now, during this webinar, our very self is shifting. In this moment, cells are dying, cells are being born, subtle changes, even now, at this moment. So you might ask me, why is that an important insight? Because it's about our relationship to change, how we respond to change, that determines the tenor of our lives, our ability to relate to others with compassion and wisdom. Do we respond typically with a sense of suffering, of wanting things to stay the same? Oh no, you're not like you were yesterday. Or maybe you want things to be different than they seem to be going. Whichever way, you wind up with the second noble truth of Buddhism, the suffering, the truth of dukkha. We talk about dukkha, and there's a range of yuckiness associated with dukkha. It can be just a slight sense of unsatisfactoriness or something that's just not right, or major distress, anger, outrage, suffering. We might experience dukkha when we see how our bodies are changing as we get old, or how our neighborhood is changing from what used to be quaint to now some garish plastic parody of itself, or how the body politic has become a site of hatred and contempt, how the earth itself is in distress. And now we have the pandemic, COVID-19. What more can be said about dukkha, about suffering? These signs of change are sites of suffering. Facing the truth of constant change can be tricky for us. We can fixate on ourselves as being a witness. Oh, I'm the same, but all of that is changing around me. I have a fixed, permanent self. But of course not. Even our own being is not a thing. but is empty of enduring qualities. Of course, that's the third noble truth of the three marks, the truth of selflessness. There is no fixed self. There's just this, this, and this, responding to that, and that, and that. Truth of suffering, the truth of impermanence, truth of no fixed self. If we can really allow ourselves to see this in our own day-to-day life, it can help us to navigate these waters of change. Who we are right now is different, a little different from who we were when we got out of bed this morning. Subtly we change. Our thoughts, experiences, the air we breathe, the food we eat, moment to moment changes us. So there's a wonderful Zen teaching from 13th century Japan that I find so helpful for me in finding out how to negotiate what feels like a really bizarre time in our 2020 world. It's a very poetic writing by Zen Master Dogen in the Genjo Koan. And here are these lines, just a couple. When riding a boat, if one watches the shore, one may assume the shore is moving. But watching the boat directly, one knows that it is the boat that moves. The Dogen's asking us, what is your point of reference? What is watching the boat directly? If it's the boat or the self that is looking, then the self sees the shore the way we look at history. Ah, over there, that's moving. Maybe the way we see politics, the way we see racism in this country, or the pandemic in the southern states. We may see life unfolding over there. That's what's happening. That shore, that world is moving. But when we realize that, oh, it's the boat, we ourselves are also actually moving. Then we realize that we are unfolding within the activity of the world. The activity of not two. Not two. I think of this because of my own background when I look at the changes in media and communications. All these new and different ways to express and communicate. We no longer depend on only one or two sources of information. And we're able to hear from ordinary people all over the world. Different social groups with their immediate and unfiltered views. Videos of policing, of political rallies, and so much that was hidden or unseen from us before. I think of the Hong Kong protesters, the Black Lives Matters movement, so empowered by these changes in communications. And also the rise of the fascist right. Oh, this is a good change, this is a bad change. All that's changing. What about me? It's very easy for me to critique these changes without noting my own difference. I have changed. I don't communicate the way I did 10 or even 5 years ago. That so-called security of news gatekeepers is gone. Our old chosen keepers of the trusted facts has been lost. And we're forced to gather material from various sources and try to sort through and find some kind of truth that we can work from, some sense of the world around us. So this changed me looks at this changed media and also looks at the heartbreaking aspects of our lives, looking at what it is to be human today in 2020 in the US, the pandemic, and the fascism and the racism. So I go back to Dogen again. If one examines the 10,000 dharmas with a deluded body and mind, one will suppose that one's mind and nature are permanent. But if one practices intimately and returns to the true self, it will be clear that the 10,000 dharmas are without self. There's great freedom there. One practices intimately, which is what we were doing when we were sitting zazen. It is what we do when we interrogate our knee-jerk reactions and we return to the true self, the changing self, the awareness of the changing self, this moment mind, this moment, not that moment. It will be clear that everything is without a permanent self. Dogen's reminding us that if we're deluded in our thinking, we think that the way things are right now are the way that they are in a permanent manner, but they're just moment by moment by moment. And we think that our own views and the world itself will not change, that this is the way it is now. We are not the same as we were last year. Our reactions and responses to the politics cannot be the same as they were last year. So Dogen tells us, but if one practices intimately and returns to the true self, it will be clear that the 10,000 dharmas are without self. Let's parse that line. If one practices intimately and returns to the true self, what would that be like for you? To remind yourself, let me remind myself that I am part of this broken world. That I am part of this broken world. To stop and to breathe. To completely attend to this moment. And then to roll up our sleeves and say, well, what can I do right now? How can I serve today? There's an image from one of the oldest early Buddhist Mahayana teachings in the Perfection of Wisdom of 8,000 Lines. It's my favorite image. The scene is a riverside, kind of like Garrison. And we see a bodhisattva who's piloting a ferry boat full of people from one side to the other. And of course, that's a classic Buddhist metaphor for waking up, moving from the shore of suffering and grasping to the shore of serving others and being one with the world. So I'm going to read it first. Since the pronoun is never clear, I like to read it as she because I identify as she and her. She courses in dharmas as empty, signless, and wishless, but she does not experience the blessed rest, nor does she course in a sign. As a skillful ferrywoman goes from this shore to the other shore, she also does not stand at either end, nor does she stand in the great flood. Okay, I'm going to repeat it again. I'll use they. They course in dharmas as empty, signless, and wishless, but they do not experience the blessed rest, nor do they course in a sign. As a skillful ferry person from this shore to the other shore, but also does not stand at either end, nor do they stand in the great flood. It evokes the life of a bodhisattva. No matter what our spiritual view, we still undertake to carry people across the sea of suffering. Right down the street from here is where the Catholic Worker was started. And when I've been on street retreats, I often will take a meal. They offer a free meal to the people who are living on the street. And the best food in town is at the Catholic Worker. Definitely bodhisattvas, ferrying people across, giving a meal. Simple, simple service. The life of a bodhisattva is the way we carry people across the sea of suffering. It reflects for me the simple, grounded practice of meditation that allows us to recognize that we are alive and therefore responsible. We are alive and we are connected and responsible. Also, when I read this little verse about ferrying people across the river of suffering, I also feel like inspired by the idea of a life of caring and service. Even when we're in the midst of meeting the incredible changes that are happening in life around us. They course in dharmas as empty, signless, and wishless, the flowing stream of life. That flowing stream can teach us how to meet life moment by moment, and how to live a life of value. Now, this bodhisattva, who is you and is me, experiences what's rising right now, what is up for us. Not a fixed thing. It is empty of any fixed quality. It is changing, transient. And how could we not know that with the daily reports from the scientists and from the epidemiologists, the remarks from the various politicians in this country and around the world. All of the changing views and understandings of the pandemic. Transient. And the incredible changes that have occurred ever since. Somehow that, in my view, the pandemic, which brought so many people to a stop, allowed them to see what they had not been seeing past 50 years in the fight against racism. Suddenly, ears were opened, eyes were opened. Change is happening. Are we witnessing it? Are we a part of it? Are we serving it? That is the question. Because it's not like we're just standing on the shore. We're all part of this change. It's magnificent change. It's frightening change. How can we serve? That's what Dogen asks us. That's what the Bodhisattva asks us. So the denial of racism, the denial of the autocracy that's going on in this country, the ongoing denial of climate change, that's what we're faced with in this world. And the sutra says the Bodhisattva recognizes that each momentary event, each momentary person, feeling, or thought has no permanent name. It is signless because it can't be fixed by a single word or phrase. It is wishless because we see that desire for it not to be here does not help. Work must be done. We have to row that boat across the sea of suffering. Like a pilot of a ferry, navigating the ferry boat from shore to shore, not stopping on either shore, moving with the flowing waters of time, constantly being present to life as it is, constantly being present as time flows on. Even when we feel vulnerable, we can also feel courage because we're on top of the moment. We're not lost in our idea of what we've lost or our idea of what the moment should be, but we're on top of the moment that is. So you could say that all of us here today are in this ferry boat together, making our way across the sea of life with its suffering, with its temptations, and its struggles. You could say that this today is the garrison boat, and each of us is a pilot. Or you could say that the boat is you yourself. And also, you are piloting it, making your way across the sea of change. It's an activity. How do we do this? How can we help others and help each other? How can we row that boat together? I think it's by steadying ourselves, taking a breath in, calming and stopping, and asking, how can I help? How can I serve? Yes, everything is changing around us. Yes, we ourselves are changing. And it's a grand opportunity to serve others, whether it's at home or our neighbors down the hall or down the street, our communities, our state, our world. There's so many opportunities for us to use this change just by being present. So let me close with a verse, and then I'll take some questions. Here's a verse. People are sick. How can I help? People are caught in hatred. How can I help? People are abused. How can I help? Reaching out a hand, I am with you, and we can row together. Thanks. So,
Thank you so much.
there she is.
Thank you so much, Roshi Ohara. So we have a question from Evan. How can a practitioner deal with rage as we aim toward developing equanimity?
Yes. So rage is a very powerful energy. And if we could just harness that energy and to shift it away from me against X, whatever the focus of our rage is at the moment, and grasp that energy and use it to row that boat across. So how do we do that? Take a moment. I recommend tongue up against the roof of the mouth, because it's a signal. It's a physical signal to your body to stop, to take a breath, and allow the rage to turn into a powerful strength, as opposed to something against the other, whether that's an abstract or a person. Turn it into a giving and a serving. You know, I admit that I've always had little issues with rage myself, and particularly I take long walks in Manhattan, and when I see people not wearing masks, I think I should be carrying cards that instruct them how to behave. And I can become kind of agitated about the non-mask wearers. So for me, that has become my point of teaching, my friction point for my whole life in the pandemic, my whole life of entering into what it is, my judgment that comes from the rage, and how can I turn that into a way to serve others. So that's what I encourage you to do, is try to use that energy in a different kind of way. Take that strong rage energy and turn it so that it serves.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Gidding asks, does the true self change?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's really hard when we talk about show me your true self. That's a kind of Zen thing. And what we're talking about is that which is in us, which is a part of everything else. But since everything else is changing, so is our true self. Our response to when you're asked about your true self can always be different, can always respond to the situation as it is. Because when we're involved in an abstraction such as true self, which is a wonderful awareness of our interconnection, it is also an abstraction, and we have to bring it into reality, into this moment. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Yes. Another question, how do you view death in terms of changes?
Well, it's a big change. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been with someone who's dying, moment to moment, the leaving of the life energy in the body, and you see it leaving and leaving, and then the body is completely still. And the body begins to lose its moisture. It begins to shrink. And depending on how the body is taken care of, whether it's cremated or any variety of funeral arrangements, the body continues to change until it's gone. It's completely gone. As we see when we do archaeological digs and we find a bone, maybe a part of a bone that has somehow been preserved. Change never ends.
Thank you, Roshi. Could you expand more about on the last reading that you did?
On it's a wonderful, from the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines. Is that the one you're talking about, where she courses in dharmas as empty, signless, and wishless? Okay, so that would be crossing the sea of suffering. And in that we have by empty, what we're talking about is it doesn't have any fixed, since everything is changing, there's no fixed self, there's no fixed anything. Even the oars are slightly different after each movement of the oars as we're crossing. Everything is changing. And signless, you can't just say one thing is a certain kind of way, because it's always changing. So she courses in these dharmas, courses across the river, or they cross, or he crosses the river of suffering. And that is that is an example of facing change every single day in this life that we live. If you subscribe particularly to the Buddhist notion of dukkha, that there is a quality of suffering for everything that exists. And so we are in this boat together, carrying people across. And the next line says, but they do not experience the blessed rest. It's not like they're going to get to some special place where everything's going to be great. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. No. They do not experience the blessed rest, nor do they course in a sign, nor do they get stuck in some idea, oh, I'm doing service, I'm doing good. Well, that's just another idea. That's not what is really happening as you're sitting in the boat with the water splashing in your face. As a skillful ferry person goes from this shore to the other shore, but also does not stand at either end, nor do they stand in the great flood. So that the skillfulness is that to not say, this is I am in this enlightened state once I get to this side, but you go to this side and then you go back to the other side. So we're moving back and forth between our recognition that we are part of everything, and that recognizing that we're part of everything isn't enough. One has to be completely oneself to do the work that's required, whether that's preparing food for a group of medical people, or preparing food for the homeless, or whether that's demonstrating every single day in and back and forth and making your voices heard. Those are individual acts, and yet they are part of the wholeness, and there is no end to that. And that's the last line. But also, they do not stand at either end, nor do they stand in the great flood. They don't, there's no end to this. You don't just say, okay, now we got it. We got everything we want, we're done. So when we're done is when the previous question about death, then we're pretty done.
Thank you, Roshi. We have time for one more, and it's related to suffering from Heidi. How do I sit with the pain and sadness I feel when I see the news stories of people being killed for seemingly senseless reasons? Guns, violence, loss of loved ones to COVID. I do not know any of these individuals, and yet witnessing this every day in the news is terribly painful. I do not want to separate myself from these feelings or awareness, but do not know how to be with them rightly.
That's a, excuse me, that's my doorman. This is such a question, such a beautiful question, because if we're reading texts, the newspapers, I'm so sorry, this is going to stop in a minute. There's a new doorman who doesn't know how to stop the machine. Because I want to come back to the question, which is very real. How do we, when we hear about the suffering around the world that is going on all the time, in so many places, but now it's right in front of us. How can we be with that? I think the best way is to find some kind of action, some small action, whether or not that's reaching out to an organization and offering whatever you can give. Some people can give money. Some people can give energy. I will help. I will talk to other people and tell them about this problem and try and help. I will join your organization. Some kind of action. Some kind of like getting in that boat and starting to move, even if it's, you may be kind of overwhelmed, you may have a family to take care of, or businesses to take care of, or you may be not with a lot of energy, but just one thing, some kind of action that moves you away from the kind of passive viewing of the suffering around you, but you become part of it. And it's heartbreaking. The closer we get to it, the more heartbreaking it is, but this is the truth, has always been the truth of life. I hope that's helpful, and I apologize for the noise.
Of course, it's not your fault. Thank you. Thank you so much, Roshi.
Yes, thank you, Amy.
And that's our time.
All right.
So beautiful. Thank you for your guidance.
Take care.
All right.
I'm going to leave now. Is that good?
Yes, thank you. I will close off now. Thank you again, Roshi Ohara, for being with us today. And thank you everyone who joined the call. Our next session is Tuesday, July 14th with Doctors Krista Turksma, Dr. Mark Greenberg, and Dr. Tish Jennings. Please keep checking garrisoninstitute.org for updated listings of future sessions and to view the recordings of this gathering and others. Again, we provide these sessions free of charge. If you'd like to support this effort, please consider making a donation at garrisoninstitute.org. Thank you to all those who have already. May everyone be happy, healthy, and safe.